The box was sitting on my father's bed the night he died. He had one last request. Burn it. Don't open it. Don't ask why. I promised him I would. That was my first mistake. The lock was old. Rusted. But it opened the moment I touched it, like it had been waiting for me. Inside was a photograph. A woman I didn't recognize, holding a baby. And written on the back, in my father's handwriting, my name. But I'm an only child. So who is she holding? The box smelled like smoke and secrets. I noticed it the moment I walked into my father's bedroom, sitting on his pillow like he'd placed it there deliberately. Like a message. He'd been dead for 6 hours. The hospice nurse said he'd been asking for me all morning. I was stuck in traffic. 23 minutes too late. That guilt was still sitting in my chest when I found the note taped to the box lid. Eleanor. Burn this. Don't open it. I'm begging you. He never begged for anything in his life. I told myself I'd do it. I carried the box downstairs. I even found the matches. But my hands wouldn't move. My father was the most careful man I'd ever known. He kept receipts from 1987. He labeled every drawer in his kitchen. He never left anything to chance. So why would a careful man leave a box and trust fire to finish the job? That question wouldn't let me go. I set the matches down. I sat on the kitchen floor with the box in my lap and just looked at it. It was old. Dark walnut wood, maybe. The brass lock had gone green with age. There were scratches along the bottom edge, like it had been dragged across concrete. More than once. Hidden clue number 1, the scratches on the bottom. Remember them. The lock opened without a key. That stopped me cold. I pulled at it expecting resistance and it just gave way. Like it recognized my hands. Inside, a photograph. Face down. I almost didn't turn it over. I wish I hadn't. A woman. Young, maybe 25. Dark hair. Standing in a hospital room, holding a newborn baby wrapped in yellow cloth. She was smiling at the camera like she'd just been handed the whole world. And on the back, written in my father's careful handwriting, Eleanor. Born March 4th. She made it. My name. My birthday. But the woman in that photo, I had never seen her before in my life. My mother died when I was 3. I'd grown up looking at exactly 4 photographs of her. I had her face memorized. This was not her face. I turned the box upside down. More photographs. A folded letter, edges brown with age. A hospital bracelet, tiny, newborn-sized, with a name written in faded ink. I held it up to the kitchen light. The name on the bracelet wasn't Eleanor. It was Nadia. I sat there on the cold kitchen floor for a long time. Outside, my father's neighbor was mowing his lawn. A completely ordinary sound on a completely ordinary evening. But nothing about my life was ordinary anymore. Hidden clue number 2, the yellow cloth the baby is wrapped in. You'll understand later. I opened the folded letter last. The handwriting was my father's, but the words didn't sound like him. They sounded like a man who had been running from something for 30 years. The first line read, "If you're reading this, then I failed to protect you from the one thing I swore I would." I turned the page. It was blank. The rest of the letter was missing. Someone had been here before me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my father's kitchen table until 4 a.m., turning that hospital bracelet over and over in my fingers. Nadia. Who was Nadia? By morning I had convinced myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe it was a patient he'd cared for. Maybe it was a relative I'd never met. Maybe the photo meant nothing and my exhausted, grieving brain was building a tragedy out of coincidence. I almost believed that. Then I called my Aunt Ruth. Aunt Ruth was my father's only sister. 71 years old, sharp as a blade, and she had never once in my life looked me directly in the eyes for more than 3 seconds. I'd always thought she was just awkward. I was wrong. I described the photograph. Dark-haired woman. Hospital room. Yellow blanket. Baby named Nadia. The line went completely silent. Not the silence of someone thinking. The silence of someone who has just been caught. "Where did you find that?" she finally said. Not, "What photograph?" Not, "I don't know what you mean." She knew exactly what I was describing. I told her about the box. About Dad's note. About the missing pages. She said, "And I will never forget this, Eleanor, your father loved you. Whatever you think you found, let it go. Some doors open and nothing good comes out." Then she hung up. She has not answered my call since. I drove to the county records office that same afternoon. I don't know what I was expecting. Some clerk to hand me a file labeled "The Truth About Your Life." Instead, I found something worse. My birth certificate. I'd seen it 100 times. Applied for passports with it. Filed taxes with it. But I had never looked, really looked, at the mother's name. Catherine Ann Marsh. My mother. Exactly as I'd always known. Except the certificate had been amended. There was a tiny stamp in the bottom left corner I had never noticed before. Record modified, September 1994. I was 6 months old in September 1994. Why would a birth certificate be modified 6 months after the birth? I photographed everything and drove home shaking. That night I went through every box in my father's house. Every drawer. Every shelf. In the back of his bedroom closet, behind 3 winter coats, I found a manila envelope. Inside, medical records. They were for a woman named Catherine Marsh. Admission date, March 3, discharge date, March 5, diagnosis at discharge, and this is where my hands started trembling, patient deceased. March 4th was my birthday. My mother didn't die when I was 3. My mother died the day I was born. First twist, I was never supposed to know that. Which meant everything my father told me about my mother, the stories, the memories, the 4 photographs, was a constructed lie. A performance. Maintained for 27 years. But if Catherine Marsh died giving birth to me, then who was the dark-haired woman in the photograph? And whose baby was she holding? I went back to the photograph. I flipped it over again and read my father's handwriting one more time. Eleanor. Born March 4th. She made it. She made it. Not you were born. Not our daughter arrived. She made it, like surviving was the miracle. Like it wasn't guaranteed. Like there was another baby who didn't. The truth unravels, and the second twist I didn't eat for 2 days. I just kept staring at that phrase. She made it. I started researching Catherine Marsh. Not my mother. The real one. The woman who existed before my father rewrote her into a bedtime story. What I found didn't make sense at first. Then it made too much sense. Catherine Marsh had been admitted to St. Vincent's Hospital on March 3, complications during labor. Severe hemorrhaging. She died at 11:47 p.m. on March 4. My birth certificate says I was born at 11:52 p.m. 5 minutes after my mother's heart stopped. I sat with that for a long time. A mother dying. A baby arriving. 5 minutes apart. It felt like a door closing and a window opening at the exact same moment. But that still didn't explain the woman in the photograph. I called the hospital. St. Vincent's closed in 2008. Records transferred to the county health archive. I filed a request. Paid the fee. Was told it would take up to 30 business days. I didn't have 30 days. My father's house was going to auction in 3 weeks. Everything inside it, gone. So I went back to the closet. I pulled out every coat. Every shoebox. Every folded paper bag stuffed in the corner. And behind a loose panel at the very back of the closet wall, I found a second box. Smaller than the first. No lock. No note. Inside, a single cassette tape. Labeled in my father's handwriting, for Eleanor. Only if necessary. I dug through the entire house looking for something to play it on. Found an old tape recorder in the garage, still in its original case. My father never threw anything away. Remember hidden clue number 1, the scratches on the bottom of the first box. That box had been moved. Dragged. Hidden and rehidden over 30 years. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the kitchen. Younger. Steadier. But underneath it, terrified. Eleanor, if you're hearing this, then you opened the box. And I suppose I always knew you would. You were never a child who left questions unanswered. A long pause. I need to tell you about Nadia. My hands went cold. Your mother, Catherine, God, I loved her, she was pregnant with twins. You and your sister. We didn't tell anyone. We were private people. We wanted to wait until they were safely born. They weren't. Catherine died during delivery. The first baby, your sister, she came too early. She was in critical condition. The doctors told me to prepare myself. But you, Eleanor, you came out screaming. Perfect. Furious. Alive. A twin. I had a twin. I sat in that waiting room for 11 hours. Holding you. Praying for Nadia. And then a woman sat down next to me. Her name was Grace. She'd just lost her own baby. A little girl, born still, 20 minutes before your sister arrived. She was alone. No husband. No family. Just this woman sitting in a plastic chair holding empty arms. Nadia survived the night. But the doctors said she needed months of specialist care I couldn't afford. I was a school teacher, Eleanor. I had nothing. I pressed pause. I already knew where this was going. I pressed play anyway. Grace had money. Old family money. She'd married into it and lost the husband but kept everything else. She held Nadia the morning after she lost her own daughter. And she looked at me and said, "Let me take her. Let me give her everything she needs. You keep the other one safe and I'll keep this one alive." Second twist, I said yes, Eleanor. God help me, I said yes. The tape kept going but I couldn't hear it anymore. There was a rushing sound in my ears like the world was being drained out of it. My father gave away my sister. To a stranger. In a hospital waiting room. Because he was poor and desperate and out of options. And then he spent 27 years pretending she never existed. I pressed play again. My father's voice was breaking now. I never stopped watching her. Grace sent photographs every year. Always in a yellow envelope. That's how I knew she was safe. Hidden clue number 2, the yellow cloth in the photograph. Grace always used yellow. It was her signal. Her way of saying, she's okay. She's loved. Nadia grew up wealthy. Educated. Healthy. She doesn't know about you. But Eleanor, the tape cut out. Static. Then silence. Then, in the very last second before the tape ran out, a sound. A woman's voice. Not my father's. Saying only 4 words. She's been looking too. She's been looking too. I played those 4 words back 17 times. The voice wasn't my father's. It wasn't Aunt Ruth's. It wasn't anyone I recognized, but it was calm. Deliberate. Like whoever said it knew exactly when to speak. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning I had made a decision. I was going to find Nadia. I started with what I had, Grace. Old family money. A woman who lost a baby girl the same night I was born. It took me 4 hours online. 4 hours to find the woman who had raised my twin sister for 27 years. Grace Elaine Whitmore. 73 years old. Philanthropist. Former board member of St. Vincent's Hospital. St. Vincent's, the same hospital where my mother died. The same hospital where Nadia and I were born. Grace hadn't just been sitting in that waiting room by accident. She was on the board, she knew the staff, she knew exactly what was happening in that delivery room. I kept reading. Grace Whitmore had one daughter adopted privately in 1997. Named, and the room tilted when I read this. Naomi Grace Whitmore, not Nadia anymore. They had changed her name. There was a photograph on a charity gala page from 2019. Grace Whitmore standing at a podium. And next to her, a woman, dark hair. My height. My jaw. My hands folded exactly the way I fold mine when I'm nervous, looking out at a crowd of strangers with my father's eyes. I started shaking and I couldn't stop. I found her on LinkedIn within the hour. Naomi Whitmore. Senior architect. Based in Chicago. 240 miles away from the town where I grew up. 240 miles away from the father we shared. I wrote her a message, deleted it, wrote it again, deleted it again. I spent 3 hours trying to figure out how to tell a stranger that she wasn't a stranger at all. I finally sent 6 words. I think I found your yellow envelope. She replied in 4 minutes. I've been waiting for this message my entire life. I called her. She answered before the first ring finished, and the moment I heard her voice, low, careful, with a habit of pausing before important words, I recognized it, not from memory, from the cassette tape. It was her. She was the woman on the tape. She's been looking too. She had been there. In my father's house. At some point, in some year I couldn't identify, she had found him. He called me, she said quietly. 3 months before he died. He said he needed to hear my voice. He didn't tell me why. He just said, I hope Eleanor finds the box before the lawyers do. He planned this, all of it. The box he knew I wouldn't burn. The tape he knew I'd find. The message he knew she'd leave. My father, a man who controlled every variable of his life, engineered his own confession from beyond the grave because he was too afraid to say it while he was breathing. Naomi and I talked for 6 hours that first night. She told me Grace had confessed everything on her deathbed 2 years earlier. The arrangement. The hospital. The yellow envelopes. Grace had kept every one my father sent back. 31 envelopes. One for every year. He never missed a single one. She said he cried when he handed me over, Naomi told me. She said he kept saying, tell her I had no choice. Tell her I loved her before I even knew her name. I broke apart somewhere around hour 4. Not loudly. Just quietly, in the way that happens when something you didn't know was holding you together. Finally, let's go. We met in person 11 days later. A coffee shop exactly halfway between our cities. I got there 20 minutes early and sat facing the door. When she walked in, I didn't need to ask if it was her. She was wearing yellow. We didn't hug immediately. We just stood there in the middle of a busy coffee shop, looking at each other's faces like we were reading a book we'd always known existed but never been allowed to open. Then she said, he had your eyes too, didn't he? And I couldn't speak for a long time after that. We are still learning each other slowly. Carefully. Like people handling something that nearly didn't survive. There are good days and hard days. Days when I'm furious at my father for the years he stole from us. Days when I understand exactly why he did what he did, and the grief of that understanding is somehow worse than the anger. Naomi asked me once if I would have wanted to know sooner. I told her I didn't know. She nodded like that was the most honest answer I could have given. My father loved me enough to keep me. He loved Nadia enough to let her go, and he loved us both enough to make sure, eventually, we found our way back to each other. I don't know what to do with all of that, I don't know if I ever will, but I kept the box. I couldn't burn it, I never could have. And if you discovered that the person who raised you made an impossible choice before you could speak, would you forgive them for surviving it the only way they knew how?